to click on the link from the original email instead of the calendar application.
Oh,
I use a Mac at home
I'll see
too,
about that.
and sometimes the link is a bit trunked.
I'll see about that. Anybody know what the date was of the sending of that original invite?
January 24.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Pamela again. I just want to make sure that I've noted the presence of everybody who's on the line at the moment. So I have Attila, I have Danielle, Taillon, Kirsten, Michelle Washer, Robin
Yes.
Leeson, Sulema Pioli. Sulema.
Hello, Pamela.
Hi.
I got it finally.
Perfect. Welcome on the line. And
Thank
then I
you.
see that Varakapat Nankumar, you have joined as well. Can we test your sound, Nankumar? I see you are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Welcome on the line. We also have
Thank
Kent.
you.
Thank you. We have Kent, we have Judy.
Hello.
And we have Stan, also Stan Rogers from the DPOC, who is joining as an observer for this meeting. I see you are online.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hello. And I believe we are with Julia Wilson. Are you also online, Julia? And I think Stian was also planning to join the call. However,
I understand. I've got a text from Theon saying that he will join us a little bit late.
A little bit late. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Pamela, this is Judy again. I'm afraid despite Michelle's advice, I can't get through on the web app, and I'd really like to be able to. Most of the time when we have a calendar request, there is a second URL that's provided in case there's difficulty getting through, and I don't seem to have that on this one. So I wonder if you can just have a quick look at that and let me know if anything can be done about that.
Yeah, I think Tina is working on an email
at
this moment.
Thank you.
I just want to test Evan Harvey. You just announced yourself. Can we also test your sound, please? Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good morning. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Excellent.
Judy, so I think Tina just sent you a link. You should be receiving that soon. And in case, maybe.
So I've just clicked the URL that you just emailed me, Tina, and it's the same as in the original message, and it just goes to a blank Skype for meeting screen.
Okay, so maybe another way to get to the meeting is to go to your downloads folder on your computer, and sometimes the folder that installs the plugin will show in that folder. Perhaps you can click that and it will start installing the plugin you need to access the meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm doing that now. I expect that will work. It would be great to have that because they update the plugin very frequently. So when we have them in the future, it would be great to have that link there just to save me trying to find it.
And
but
we just got
I think I'm getting there now.
okay. We just got a remark from Daniel that if you're using Mac, it could take you a few tries before you get to run it.
Yeah, this is the thing, Judy. You have to try to click in the blue line below the pop-up.
The blue line below the...
When you click on the link, there's a pop-up telling you that you should download the app, right? But it
Yeah, I don't get
opens.
that.
Okay.
No, it doesn't work for me.
Maybe you have pop-ups blocked currently on your browser.
Yeah.
Well, I only just used it yesterday with Bastian and Chelsea, and the meeting request that they sent me had the additional link in it, so it's not quite. It just isn't working for me at the moment. I don't really know why.
Okay.
I'm gonna try it again. Yeah, I'm afraid I have downloaded the app, and every time I try to click the link, it just goes to a blank Skype for Business screen. So this is going to be a real challenge for me. I'll just need some assistance in keeping track of who wants to speak, and of course, I don't know that I have a copy of the slides here. Do I have them in one of my emails?
Yeah, Judy, we'll help monitor who wants to provide any comments and inform you accordingly. And
Okay.
Daniel also just informed in the Skype chat that he chose option 2, join the meeting. He was not able to download the app to actually join the meeting, but he could join via the link to just the option 2, join the meeting
Well,
link.
all I can say is it's not working for me.
No.
So
And sometimes Chrome does not work as well. If you open up.
I'm using Firefox at the moment. I can try to open it in Safari as an alternative.
Judy, this is Chelsea here.
Yeah.
You do have
Hi.
the slides. They were sent out
Okay.
in a PDF format ahead of the call. So as Plan
Yeah, okay,
B,
that's this package this morning.
yeah, you've got it. You should be able to
Okay.
follow along the slides. We will monitor the chat box and let you know who has a comment. And then we will work
Okay.
with you after the call. Let's do a more in-depth look at the technology issues so we can help you get that working better
Yeah.
for next time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, okay. Sorry about that, always stressful.
Yeah, a little bit. I am trying an alternative on Safari right now, which is doing something slightly different. I'll see if it works. I'm not through yet, but we will see.
Judy, if you agree, then we'll start in a few minutes to give you a chance to try to log in through a different browser, perhaps. Just let us know if you get there.
Something is happening now using Safari, and I am a little bit confident that I'm about to get through in the next minute or so.
The beauty of technology when it works, right?
I know. Yeah.
I just also wanted to acknowledge the presence of Julia Wilson on the line. Can we test your sound, Julia?
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hi, good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. Okay, Judy, so we'll hear from you.
Are we open now, Pamela?
No, Judy, we will just wait if you're almost joining, or we can also start the meeting if you're advised to do so.
Okay. It just asked for my name to join the meeting.
Yeah.
So
We'll just give
I
you
think
a
it will be
moment
working.
and then we'll start the live stream
Okay.
with a roll call.
Thank you. Sorry for the slight trouble. Okay, I'll tell you what, it's taking a long time, regardless if it's going to work or not, but it's still in process right now. So I suggest, why don't we start the roll call, open the meeting, and if I'm lucky enough to enter the webinar interface, then that would be great, and otherwise I'll need assistance from the Secretariat in managing who would like to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Tina Nybo Jensen, and I'm Senior Coordinator Governance Relations here at GRI. Welcome to this meeting of the Global Sustainability Standards Board, known by its acronym the GSSB, held on the 7th of March 2017. This virtual meeting is being hosted from the GRI Secretariat Office in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Please note that all public GSSB meetings are being recorded, and you can find the audio recording on the GSSB webpage along with the high-level summaries of the previous GSSB meetings. Present from the GRI Secretariat today are Anna Krotova, the Manager for the Standards Division, Sebastian Buch, the Director of the Standards Division, Chelsea Reinhardt, Deputy Director Standards Division, Laura Espinat, Manager of the Standards Division, and Pamela Carpio, Senior Coordinator Governance Relations. And we'll now start with a roll call of the GSSB members. We have Mr. Attila Yalikaya.
Attila is present.
Thank you. We have Mr. Daniel Tayang.
Present.
Thank you. We have Mr. Evan Harvey.
Present.
Thank you. We have Miss Julia Wilson.
Hello, President.
Thank you. And Mr. Ken Swift.
Present.
And Miss Kirsten Margrethe Hovey.
Present.
Mr. Michel Washer.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Nankumar Vadakapat.
Good morning, President. Thank you.
Thank you. And Miss Robin Leeson.
Present.
Thank you, Robin. And Miss Sulema Pioli.
Sorry, hello, present.
Thank you, Sulema. And Miss Judy Kuszewski, the Chair of the GSSB.
Hello, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And then we would just like to note that GSSB member Mr. Stian van Draak will join us a bit later on the call. And Mr. Daniel Ingram, Mr. Dwight Justice, and Mr. Jürgen Buchsbaum sent their apologies to this meeting. Also joining us today are Mr. Stanley Rogers from the GRI Due Process Oversight Committee, and he's attending this meeting as an observer. And I'll now hand to, thank you, Stan, and I'll now hand to Chair Judy Kuszewski to open the meeting.
Thank you very much, Tina. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to those of you who are listening on the live cast. Thank you for making the time for this meeting today. And as you know, as Tina has just said, we are also welcoming Stan Rogers, member of the Due Process Oversight Committee, who's joining as an observer today. Just for information, we do have a standing invitation to members of the DPOC if they would like to observe GRI, GSSB meetings, and Stan has taken us up on that offer today, so thank you very much. The overarching purpose of today's meeting is to discuss and approve the proposed membership for the two project working groups that we would like to move forward with according to GSSB's work plan as soon as possible, which have to do with the standards on occupational health and safety and water. And you will all have received some background materials on this in the past. So this is the agenda that we're looking at right now on the webinar interface. If there are no questions about the agenda per se, I think I would like at this point to turn it over to Laura from the Standards Division to start the discussion of the Occupational Health and Safety Working Group, and then we will have Anna talk us through the water candidates as well later on. If there are no questions about that, then Laura, I'd like to just turn it over to you if that's okay.
Hi, Judy. This is Chelsea Reinhardt here. I'm just going to give a couple minutes of overview before I turn it over to Lara to go through the OHS process and to Anna to take you through the water working group process. We're just having a bit of a series of technical difficulties today, so bear with us just one moment. So just a little bit of context that's applicable to both working groups, and then we'll take you through the detailed process for selecting proposed membership for both working groups. I think the first point, and I know we discussed this a bit in last month's call, is that we had really an exceptionally high number of very good candidates for both of these groups, and that is in part really thanks to the efforts that both Lara and Anna put out there, but also GSSB members who helped to get the word out about the working group process and other GRI staff and teams. So we had the intent of these groups was to really ensure that we had the right kind of content expertise in the room to lead these working group discussions, and that's something that I think GRI historically has struggled to get within our working groups, and I think we've been extremely successful, maybe a bit too successful with the applicants for both of these groups. And what's important context to note is that in both groups we are going to have to be turning down candidates that are extremely well qualified and that actually tick all of the boxes for criteria that would give them the right set of expertise. So one of the proposals, which is in the papers that went out to the GSSB, is to look at some kind of a alternate way to engage these experts. We're calling it an expert review panel, but it could be something like a dedicated webinar or a workshop. And we'll talk more with the GSSB later in this session today about what that could look like. But I think that's important to mention from GRI's perspective because we want to maintain relationships with these experts who took the time to speak to us and to apply to the working groups, who have relevant content expertise both for these groups but also for future projects that we might want to run. And we also want to make sure that we are able to take advantage of some of this input they can provide. When we spoke with the GSSB sponsors about the proposed working group membership, they expressed a concern that we really shouldn't allow the groups to get much bigger than the 15 member sort of target that we're working towards, because that becomes much harder to make sure that every group member has a voice in the process. So we have tried to limit the group size for both of these, but that has involved trade-offs and not selecting people who are very good candidates. So I think that's important to mention at the onset, and also just to note about what those expert review panels could look like. The format is very much to be determined together with the GSSB. We have done, in previous projects, we have done sort of dedicated webinars for membership of various organizations or groups. It could look like that. It could be during the public comment period, but important to note that we don't envision this would affect the roles of the project working group itself or the GSSB as set out in the due process. Rather, these expert panels or dedicated webinars would just provide an additional layer of input, identify fatal flaws or critical issues, or help to validate some of the work to date of the project working group, which still then would feed into the GSSB process. So that's the first point that I wanted to make, which is overarching for both groups. And the second one is just a comment about geographical representation. So in the due process, we are not required, as part of that protocol, to have geographical representation within these working groups. The only hard requirement is to really make an attempt to have multi-stakeholder constituencies represented. And we have found that actually getting geographical representation is challenging for both of these. So both groups are weighted more heavily towards the EU and North America. We did make concerted efforts during the nominations process to spread the word through our networks, through regional hubs, through people we had on the ground, through launch events and in-person events that GRI was attending, through multiple media channels to try and get the word out. But one of the challenges we have inherent to this is the language issue. And the fluency in English is quite an important criteria in order to be an effective member of that working group. So in both working groups, we interviewed candidates from Asia or from Latin America who didn't have the right language skills to be able to really participate in that process. What we are proposing for both groups would be to then supplement the working group process and the GSSB's input with more targeted and translated webinar opportunities during the consultation period to ensure that we are getting actually input and feedback from local regions, but that happens in a way that is more customized. So again, if you have more ideas about that, I think we're very open to hearing your suggestions, but I just wanted to give you that level of background context before we move into both working group processes. Any questions on that before I hand it over to Lara? No. Okay.
Thank you, Chelsea. We'll bear all of that in mind as we discuss the two particular slates of candidates for the working groups. Laura?
Thank you, and hello everyone. This is Laura Spinac, manager of the Standards Division here at GRI, and I will be introducing the next session on the membership for the Occupational Health and Safety Project Working Group. The aim of this session now is for the GSSB to discuss and approve the membership for this group. For this session, you will need items 1 and 2. We will be using item 1 primarily, which includes the proposed composition, and I will reference relevant line numbers throughout my presentation. And item 2 is provided for your information. It is an Excel overview with all of the applications received for occupational health and safety. As you might have seen, candidates have been anonymized for the purpose of this discussion, so names and personal information have been taken out, and candidates have been numbered consecutively. So you can refer to the candidate number whenever you want to reference a specific candidate. I'll start by explaining the process that we have followed to select the candidates, and then I will present the proposed membership and our rationale behind it. And I will also highlight certain areas where we have had low participation and our proposed strategies for addressing this during this process. And then we will open up for questions from the GSSB, and I will hand it over to Judy to guide us through the discussion and approval. So first, just a brief explanation of the process that we followed. We had an open call for project working group nominations running from the 16th of January until the 19th of February. And during this time, any interested expert could apply to be part of the project working group. The Standards Division made publicly available the project proposal as approved by the GSSB, as well as the terms of reference outlining the selection criteria, the time commitment, and the project timeline for this process, as well as an application form that applicants could submit together with their CV. For occupational health and safety, we received a total of 49 applications, and on table 1 of item 1, line 18, you can see an overview of the applications received by constituency group and region. And on the slide, you can also see a summary of that. We received 1 application from investors, 3 applications from labor, and there is 1 more application from labor in the pipeline that we hope will come in the coming days. And as you probably know, the labor participation was coordinated by Dwight Justice with the support of other labor representatives in GRI's governance bodies. And we know that a lot of time and work went into that, so thank you very much to Dwight and everyone else that helped coordinate this effort. And then we received a high number of applications from business, civil society, and mediating institutions. And in terms of regional breakdown, as Chelsea mentioned, most applications came in from Europe and North America, but also, although to a lesser extent, from Asia for this group. The Standards Division reviewed all of the applications received against the selection criteria in the terms of reference, and we interviewed about 60% of the applicants. So in total, we conducted about 30 interviews. The GSSB sponsors for this project, Stian van Draag and Kirsten Hovey, as well as the GSSB chair, Judy Kuszewski, reviewed and provided input to the final selection of candidates, and they help us narrow down the list to just 15 members. On table 2 of item 1, you can see our proposal for the membership of the Occupational Health and Safety Working Group. So I will just walk you through that and explain our rationale behind this. So on the slide, you can see a summary of the constituency breakdown that we are proposing. According to the GSSB due process protocol, the working group shall have, wherever possible, at least one member for each of the constituencies that the GSSB is made of. So we have proposed 4 business representatives, and also, as soon as the additional application from Labour comes in, 4 Labour representatives as well. And the aim, based on feedback from GSSB members, was to have a balance between the business and the Labour representation for this group in particular. Then we have 3 representatives from civil society and also for mediating institutions, as well as 1 investor, making a total of 15 members. In addition to constituency balance, which is required by due process, we also considered regional and gender diversity. For regional diversity, you can see that in table 2, in item 1, the majority of members come from Europe and North America, and I will speak to that in a moment. And for gender, this was not included in item 1, but for this proposed membership, 1/3 of the members are female. In terms of selecting candidates, the GSSB protocol states that the principal criterion for selecting candidates shall be the identification of the best person for the job. So that includes relevant knowledge and experience in occupational health and safety and sustainability reporting, as well as availability to perform the job. We also considered English skills, both written and verbally, as well as previous experience in multi-stakeholder initiatives. For the investor and labor candidates, the selection was pretty straightforward. Whereas for business, civil society, mediating institutions, we had a high number of highly qualified experts with very strong subject matter expertise. And this is what was the challenging part for us during this process, and where we spent most time reviewing applications and trying to narrow down the list to just 10 members for those 3 constituencies. So because too many applicants from business, civil society, mediating institutions tick all of the boxes, we tried to ensure that the selection of members for these constituencies represented a balanced mix of perspectives and expertise in different content-related areas. So whenever there were similar candidates with similar backgrounds or viewpoints, we worked together with the GSSB sponsors to make a selection between those candidates that brought similar perspectives. In line 50 of item 1, you can see the different content-related areas and perspectives that we have tried to have represented with the proposed membership. So you can see that we bring in expertise in different high-risk sectors for occupational health and safety, such as mining and metals, chemical, construction, manufacturing. We also have different backgrounds in the group, from medical doctors to safety engineers, accountants, academics. We have experts that have been involved in the development of occupational health and safety management system standards, including the upcoming ISO 45001, as well as experts who have been part of similar processes or groups to develop reporting guidance and metrics for occupational health and safety. So as much as possible, we try to have as many different viewpoints and areas of expertise represented for business, civil society, and mediating institutions. And in Table 2, you can find more information for each of the candidates, including the organization where they currently work, their job title, and the specific background and expertise that each would bring to the group. So next, I just want to spend a few minutes highlighting those areas where we have had a low participation in the group. So for investors and the Asia region, we only have one expert in the group. And then for Latin America and Africa, we don't have any official representation when you look at where the experts are based at the moment. However, I just wanted to point out that some of the experts that we are proposing do bring extensive working experience in both Latin America and Africa. So to give you an example, candidate number 4 is originally from South Africa and has extensive experience working in Southern Africa. And similarly, candidate number 3 has extensive experience working in Brazil. However, in order to engage with these groups and ensure that their viewpoints are represented and taken into account during this process, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we would be looking to organize webinars and workshops during the public comment period to reach to those groups. And finally, as mentioned, we would be looking to convene an expert review panel to allow additional experts who have not been selected to participate in the process. So that's a brief tour of the proposal in item 1. So now I would like to hand it over to Judy to solicit any questions from the GSSB and to guide us through the discussion. The first thing that we would be looking to do is to get the GSSB to approve the proposed composition of the project working group as outlined in Table 2, and to check if the GSSB would agree to approve the 4th labor expert via email by Tuesday, the 14th of March, the latest, or as soon as the application comes in the following days. And then we have 2 questions for the GSSB on the additional outreach that we have proposed for this process. So with that, over to you, Judy.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for that extensive overview of the review process so far. And I'd also like to take a moment to say thank you to the GSSB sponsors, who are Kirsten Hoofy and Sian van Racht, who both assisted in the review and debate of candidates for this working group. I'd like to share that through the chat function on the webinar, one of our members, Michelle Washer, has raised a question about one of the candidates who is from the same employer as he is. And the question is, does this then require Michelle to recuse himself from the discussion of the slate of candidates? May I open this up for a bit of discussion and possibly a bit of advice from the Standards Division? I believe the answer to the question is that Michel is certainly not obliged to recuse himself from the discussion. This is not required by our due process, but it is appreciated that he has declared this issue. And should there be any discussion of it or any questions about the propriety of it, then we should hear those now. Would that be a correct way of framing this? Perhaps Chelsea, if you're there, if you can help to answer that question.
Sure, Judy. Yes, I agree. I think there are no concerns from a due process perspective about that potential conflict of interest, and actually in the due process, GSSB members themselves are eligible to join project working groups, and that would be potentially the ultimate conflict of interest. There are several other GSSB members or other members of GRI governance bodies who have colleagues who have applied to join the working groups. And from a standards division perspective in carrying out the initial interviews and screenings, we have tried to be as true to the real criteria and expertise needed in these groups as possible, and have largely disregarded the organizational affiliations. So I think the same would be true for the GSSB members in looking at the proposed membership. But thank you for raising the issue, and certainly open to hear other ideas about that.
Okay. We do have a couple of other hands raised. Kent Swift, may I ask you to share your question that you have put into the chat area?
Yeah, it's just that, since this area is a labor area, I guess I was a little surprised that there were only 4 people who applied that are from the labor category, as opposed to so many from other areas. I was wondering if you could offer any insight on that.
Yes, there is an answer to this. This is because for as long as GRI has been in existence, the labor constituency has undertaken their own democratic process to identify from within their ranks suitable candidates. So therefore, their candidates do not come from the same sort of public call for participation that the rest of the 49 or however many it is candidates come from. The 4 that we receive have been already vetted by the labor organizations that are taking part in GRI, and therefore that explains the quite precise number that will tend to come through for any given working group or task that we ask for labor participation from. Is that also a correct way of answering the question, Chelsea?
Yes, that's correct. I think the working through the ITUC is really the critical element of that dimension here, and that is really unique to the labor representation. So what we are asking the GSSB to approve today would be basically the proposed membership as it stands now. And if there is an additional labor application that is received by next Tuesday, then we will circulate that for additional approval via email. But if that's not received, then we would go ahead with the proposed membership. And that would allow us to move ahead at least with the scheduling element of this group, which is going to be a key challenge.
Great.
While we're
Thank
on
you.
the subject, sorry to cut in there. While we're on the subject, Chelsea, can you answer? There's another question from Daniel Thailand on exactly this issue. Why is there a time lag with this final member of the potential labor slate of candidates? Can you shed any light on that?
Well, given that we have neither Dwight nor Jurgen attending the call, they are probably better positioned to answer that. Our understanding is that the layers of internal approval needed from the labor organizations really can take a lot of time, and we've actually had a lot of hard effort from Dwight over the last week and a half to try and expedite that process in line with our kind of final cutoff point. So I think it is a unique context for us. It has challenged the project timeframe, but I think we're feeling fairly good about the representation we have at the moment. And if we get one more candidate, that's excellent. But if not, I don't think we should delay the timeline further.
Yeah, I understand it's just an administrative delay, and hopefully it will be resolved in the next couple of days. I have a couple of hands that have been raised. Kirsten Hulke, would you like to raise a question?
Yes, it's thank you, Judy. It's to the same as Michelle raised, and that I've seen also Nankumar has raised. There is a colleague of mine that has applied for the Occupational Health and Safety Project Working Group, and I have, of course, been very clear all the way about his candidacy and that he is certainly is a colleague of mine, just to clear that out.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we appreciate this effort by members to identify where they have a connection to one of these proposed candidates, and I believe we have determined that there is no barrier. This does not present a barrier to their participation, but it is good practice for us to ensure that there are no questions about this, that it is clear to everyone. Can I see? There's quite a bit of chat going on in the chat function. I wonder if any of the members would like to publicly raise a question about anything. Evan Harvey, would you like to raise a question? Or offer any insight as to the low interest from the investor community?
No, I don't know that it's a question so much as a surprise, because I know that a number of investors have this subject as a topic of concern and are looking at it specifically in a lot of different ways. So I'm wondering if it's your opinion on whether it's a matter of the word getting out or people being overcommitted and not wanting to join another working group, but it just seems like the kind of community that would have a lot of interest in participation, and I'm surprised we only have one applicant.
I don't know if the Standards Division has any insight in that, if we know anything beyond the applications that we did receive, as opposed to applications that we have not received from anyone. But I would certainly invite them to say so if they do know anything about that. Evan, is it helpful in your view for us to do as the proposal has been raised, which is to organize some webinars and briefings during the process of public comment to ensure that key constituencies such as the investment community are engaged with the issues, even if they're somewhat underrepresented in the working group per se?
It can't hurt. I mean, I'm wary of all these calendar commitments as all of us are. So, but yeah, to me, the impression seems to be that it's just a matter of awareness more than disinterest, because I know that there is certainly a lot of interest.
Okay.
Judy, this is Bastian. Maybe just to provide a bit more explanation on this particular point. What we've seen with the investor community in general is definitely interest in our work, and also that they're following this quite closely. Where they have, I think, an issue with our process is the time commitment to be on a working group and serve on a working group, and in particular the analyst level. To fly them around, attend an in-person meeting and attend a series of calls. This is usually where they say, well, we will provide feedback into the process at some point in time, and I think everything that was just said in terms of involving them through dedicated webinars and reaching out to particular groups can be done. But we've seen in the past that that is a structural issue with this particular constituency in terms of commitment and making time available. I think we will have to look at ways to moderate that. What I personally, based on experience with GI process, expect is that there are some issues that will open for review going forward that will be an easy sell for the investor community because they have dedicated staff looking at this particular issue. But as soon as it is something that is part of a portfolio of issues to look at on an analyst level, and you don't have dedicated people in-house that deal with one specific issue only, then it is more difficult for them to rationalize the time commitment.
Thank you, Bastian. That's a helpful piece of context. I'd like to acknowledge that Stian van der Ack has joined us on the line, and is welcome to participate in the discussion at any time now, if he would like to say anything as one of the board members who helped to review these candidates in the first place. There are some comments in the chat expressing support in general for this idea of holding webinars or some sort of briefings in order to ensure that people, not just in certain constituencies, including investors, but also the geographic issue is also, there is some opportunity to engage people more directly in regions that may be somewhat underrepresented in this group. It does sound like a smart idea to me in general to have that built into the project working group process, regardless of what the composition is of the final membership, because it's great always to have that additional participation from people, and I think we're seeing a lot of support from that from the board. I have a comment here from Attila Yerlikaya. Attila, would you like to raise a point? Attila, you may be on mute. Oh, there you are.
Yes. I was on mute. Just turned on. I totally agree with Süleyman's and Nand Kumar's point on the underrepresentation of a number of regions. Is there anything that we can be of any help to expand to these geographies or regions?
I mean, I think the issue has to do with the number of applicants identified from those regions, rather than any kind of barrier that we may put up to their participation. Yes.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Sulema. I just want to point out that the main barrier from South America could be the language. So I do have a suggestion to make after your, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is one thing that that the Standards Division staff have just identified as one of the challenges. That one of the things that potentially reduces the number of people coming forward to participate in these working groups is the requirement that they operate in English as the working language for the group. I'm sorry for the noise on my end of the helicopter going past.
Judy, it's Jan speaking. If I may jump in, and apology for the background noise. I'm sitting in the lounge at the airport. I don't know what was discussed, but I certainly support the notion of working groups, and I'm more than happy to host such a session in South Africa, to bring together the different industries, from mining to heavy industry, etc., on a country or even a Southern Africa basis, if that fits in with the philosophy of the Secretariat.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think that would be a very welcome offer. Procedurally, we do not have an obligation under GRI's due process to ensure any particular numerical balance between regions. We have a requirement to ensure that all of GRI's distinct stakeholder groups are properly represented, and we have an obligation to do our best to ensure that we have membership that is as diverse as it can be in terms of regions and any other criteria we believe are important, including gender as well. But we do not have an obligation to ensure that there are certain numbers of people from different regions before we can go ahead. And this is, in my opinion at least, that this is wise for us at this stage of development of GRI, given that the challenge of finding sufficient people across the various regions to participate would probably mean that we'd find it very difficult to convene any working group if we could not guarantee to meet those representation requirements. But obviously, as sustainability reporting becomes much more widely practiced, then I think this is an issue that will reduce in the challenge that it presents us over the years, and it clearly has reduced over the years. Many years ago, it was extremely difficult to find anyone at all from a number of different regions to participate in GRI activities, and that is far less the case than it is now. So it is certainly changing for the good, changing positively. It still has a ways to go. Sulema has raised her hand. Would like to speak, please, Sulema?
Yes, I do have a suggestion and a comment about what you just said. There's no obligation, but it's a matter of legitimacy. I'm very concerned of not having any people from Africa and South America in terms of impact on health and safety. It's where, in terms of region, the main impacts occurs. But having said that, I know that there are other sorts of barriers. I do know that the Secretariat did the best work in terms of having a diversity. But I do have a suggestion. We should think about regional panels contributing for these working groups. So I can support Glaucia here in Brazil to conduct a technical discussion in Portuguese and to summarize in English. And then we could have contributions from this part of the world.
Thank you, Sulema. I think that's a very welcome offer, which I think we should look at very seriously as part of the exposure process during the working group's period of operation.
Thank you, Judy.
Any other comments, questions on the occupational health and safety project working group? I see Daniel has raised a point here to also address this problem of representation and ensuring that people in different regions of the world have an opportunity to comment. He suggested that the working groups could, if there is a possibility for working groups to meet in a variety of locations around the world, and as part of that to hold a stakeholder consultation within those regions. Practically and logistically, I don't know what the plan is there. I would leave it to the Standards Division to consider that suggestion and come back to us with a recommendation one way or another. Unless they have a thought right now, but I think we can probably leave it to the practicalities of it later. So thank you for the suggestion. I think we should always be mindful of whatever opportunities we have to share GRI's work and to encourage people who currently find it difficult to participate for one reason or another, whether that's proximity or language or what have you, so that the result is as strong and widely supported as it can be. May I call the question then as to the approval of the project working group composition? We have a question before the GSSB to approve the proposed composition of the project working group as outlined in Table 2 in the documents. Would anyone like to raise a motion to this effect? If there's no need to actually call a vote on this, we can actually just approve this by consensus. If no one objects, then I will assume we have passed this slate of candidates by consensus. So hearing no objections, I think the record can reflect that we have approved that slate of candidates, and thank you very much to the Standards Division and to everybody who's contributed to that. There have been a variety of suggestions made as to finding opportunities to engage people who are from underrepresented groups or regions, which will be captured and considered in the coming weeks as part of the practical operation of getting these working groups underway. And we'll come back with a plan of action that helps to resolve that issue. Daniel Tayant has also raised a question in the chat asking, does this mean we can add to the working groups after today? I believe the answer to that is no. We will now have approved the full slate of 15 slots that are available for this working group. So to the extent that that was not clear to everyone. Yes, please.
Sorry, Chelsea here, just one comment.
Pardon me, except for the outstanding Labour candidate.
You got it.
Mm-hmm. That we know we are expecting to receive in the next couple of days. Apart from that, all 15 vacancies will then be
Can anybody hear me?
Working group. Yes, I can. Hello.
Can anybody? Oh, hi. Okay, I'm just joining now. I've been having technical problems, and so I've missed a lot of stuff. But I'm
sorry
here
to hear
now.
that.
I hope.
There have been a few technical problems. So this is Dwight Justice joining us for the meeting. Thank you very much for that, Dwight. We have, I believe, just approved the slate of candidates for the Occupational Health and Safety Project Working Group, pending the final Labour candidate that I know you are aware of, which we hope to receive in the next couple of days.
Yes. Okay. I had some questions about it, but I guess I'm too late now. I have to admit, I didn't like the technical arrangements at all. It's been exasperating because I tried to reach you on time and it didn't work. Okay.
I'm sorry to hear that, Dwight. I don't want to close the discussion prematurely. If there are questions that you still want to raise, we do have a bit of time to discuss it if needed. So, is there anything that you would like to add into the discussion?
Well, I understand that there are 4 business people that are all, health and safety experts, and we're trying to provide you with 4 worker people that are health and safety experts. But I have some questions about the others because they're not all health and safety people. So my question is, in terms of the balance, I would like to think that we're still dealing with people who are, for the most part, health and safety people, and apparently we're not. And so I wanted to hear what the explanation was for some of the non-health and safety experts.
Can I invite Chelsea and Laura maybe to respond to that, and I will also invite Kirsten and Thean from the GSSB, who've been the sponsors for this working group, to respond to that, because I believe all of the members are in fact experts in some aspect of occupational health and safety, although there's a diversity of perspectives, and of course that's the most important criterion for the composition of working groups, is the best person for the job, given the content area that the working group has to address. So, Chelsea, do you have a response on that?
And this is Laura. Thank you, Dwight.
Yeah.
It would be great if you could perhaps give us an example of one of the proposed candidates who you would not consider to be a health and safety expert, just for our own understanding.
Okay, well, I'm just looking at the say, for instance, the senior lecturer in the School of Business, and the main thing it says there is research into sustainability reporting, and then of course there's 10 years OHS governance research, but I don't know what that means.
Yes, this candidate has done extensive research in occupational health and safety reporting. So that includes research on the development of leading indicators for occupational health and safety, and she's led several processes multi-stakeholder processes for that research. She has also done extensive research on measurement of occupational health and safety and lagging indicators. And this candidate has come up with new research on different ways of measuring impact on workers, as opposed to traditional measures like lost time injury rates. And I think this candidate would bring in a very interesting perspective and would challenge some of the traditional ways of looking at occupational health and safety. This candidate has done a lot of work commissioned by the Safe Work Australia, and we can share some of the work of this candidate with you following the meeting. But we do really believe that this candidate brings in exceptional and groundbreaking research in this space and will be critical for the success of this group.
Okay. Well, then that's a good answer to what I still think is a good question. But yes, I'm satisfied with that. And then there was several others. Again, it was just understanding some of the non-employer, non-worker people, but that was the main issue. My main concern is that there is a non-technical element to occupational safety and health, which is the right of workers to participate in decisions that affect their safety, their right to belong to sort of to be able to deal with outside experts, to be able to deal with government authorities in difficult situations, and sort of the human rights angle for occupational safety and health. And my concern has always been that if there is a sort of lack of balance in terms of that perspective, then inevitably what happens is, in favor of very technical occupational safety and health concerns, the business of the right to refuse dangerous work or the right to go to the authorities and things like this that are almost human rights, they get dismissed. And that's my main interest in terms of the composition you responded.
Judy, if I can jump in there. Right, I share your concern.
I can't hear you.
Very much it's right. Can you hear me?
I can very faintly hear you. I can't hear you very well. Hello?
Okay, perhaps if Judy, you can relay. I think we share the same concern, Dwight. We have, when we looked, if I say we, that was the Secretariat with Kirsten, we looked at the members or the proposed members. That was one of the criteria that I looked for. And, you know, as a co-sponsor or champion of this process, I will certainly make sure that that specific issue is addressed through the whole process, if that will give you any comfort.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that is actually my only concern, and it is for the, if you will, the human rights or political aspect of OHS, and to be very precise, workers' participation and the right to refuse, the obligation to inform of the employer to inform workers of hazards, the respect for the hierarchy of controls, that sort of thing. And I would hate to see a GRI body not deal with that because everybody was very much management or investor oriented. I'm trying to be as frank as I can.
Dwight, I put my head on a block there, and I will fight for that. I will tie up with you in Amsterdam in 2 weeks' time, and we can just compare notes on that topic.
Okay. Well, your word is pretty good, and I'll hold you to it. So that's good enough for me.
Thanks, Dwight.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time for that little detour in the conversation, which I think was very helpful. Dwight, I hope that helped, and we certainly aim to have a working group here that is as expert and also as well-rounded in their perspectives and approaches as we possibly can, and as the topic merits, which I think we all agree in this case it does. So do you feel, Dwight, that you would like for me, again, to call question as to the approval of this slate of candidates? Do you feel that you'd like to have a vote?
Judy?
No, that's all right. I've been given assurances and I've expressed my concerns, and that's quite enough.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, did someone want to get in there with a comment? Did I hear someone just raise their hand? Okay, I'm sorry if not. We have a couple of questions on the slide here at the bottom regarding additional outreach. The first point there we've not dealt with yet, which is the question, does the GSSB, with establishing an online expert review panel for other shortlisted candidates with the aim of providing inputs to the draft standard before it goes out for public comment? Laura, would you like to tell us a little bit about the idea of this expert review panel, what it would be for, and how it might work, and then we can give you some feedback on that.
Sure. So this is the panel that Chelsea spoke to at the start of the meeting, and this would be the mechanism that we would propose to engage with some of the applicants who are not going to be selected, but that we still think are highly qualified and bring strong subject matter expertise to the group, and we want to make sure that we do get their input throughout this process. And what we would propose in terms of format and process is to have an online expert review panel in the form of a webinar or through an online review of the document just before the draft goes to the GSSB for approval, to get an additional layer of feedback and to flag any red flags or critical flaws in the standard before it goes out for public comment.
Judy, just to add to that, this is Chelsea. I think we don't need a decision on this today from the group. I think the most important thing is to approve the proposed membership or to suggest changes. So there can be further discussion. We have a slot in the in-person meeting, and by then we will also have a more definite project schedule set up for these working groups, and we can think about what form that could take and when it could slot in to the time frame. But largely, from our perspective, we will have to respond to people who've applied for this process who are very well qualified, and it's quite a good relationship perspective and good for GRI's long-term involvement with these networks to be able to say, we weren't able to accept you into the working group, but what we would like to do is to seek your input at these points in the process. We'll send you more details later on.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. And we've got a comment from Kent Swift. Kent, would you like to raise your comment with the group?
Yeah, it's just because there's such a large group of people that weren't selected but are highly qualified. I think that the idea of this expert review panel is a very good one because it keeps those people engaged with the GRI, and it also gives us the benefit of receiving their input.
Yes,
this is Dwight. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
I think we should explore this a little more in our next meeting, in this sense that it might be that the balance of the review panel is not right either, and I don't mind the motive of using people to add an additional layer and additional comments, but there is a balance issue there, and I think we should just discuss how we want to deal with that aspect of it.
Okay, can I suggest that we take this up in detail at our in-person meeting, that we do have some time set aside for this. And the idea would be to talk through what exactly is the role of an expert review panel and how might they be expected to provide input different from the input that is open to anyone and everyone during the public comment process, which incidentally is almost certain to be unbalanced in its representation in one way or another, because will be self-identified, so we will get whatever comments we get from the outside world. So we have to think about, given the requirements of the multi-stakeholder process under GRI, to ensure that there is some engagement from all of GRI's identified stakeholder groups. What does that mean for the establishment of something additional to our normal process, such as this expert review panel, and then we can make a decision at that meeting in a couple of weeks' time. Does that work?
Judy, this is Chelsea here. I have just one more comment on that. I think we can certainly discuss the format, the timing, representation for these during the in-person meeting, but what we would like to get the board support for is we will have to respond to unselected candidates within the next sort of 4 to 5 days, and what we would like to be able to say to them is that we will propose an alternate way to engage them through a dedicated webinar, and we don't need to use the words expert review panel or to provide any details, but that allows us something more than just saying, sorry, you're not selected for the working group.
Yeah, I think we've already established that there's a lot of enthusiasm for additional briefings and webinars of a variety of types to help to increase the inputs to this working group process. So that sort of language sounds like it would be supported by the board because of the nature of the conversation that we've already had, without making any specific promises around an expert review panel.
That's great.
Yeah, I have no problem with that in the sense that if you need to get back to these people in the next few days, saying something like that is not a problem. But I do think we have to have a discussion about balance, and we might need to look at other ways, and also how the weight is given to the panel, or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah. Okay.
Judy, it's Robin. I just had a quick sort of related question about the shortlisting process when we talked about shortlisted candidates having been interviewed. So I was just querying whether 50 candidates were interviewed or 15 candidates were interviewed. How big an interview list formed the basis of the group that was interviewed for shortlisting?
We did 30 for the OHS and about 24 for the water group.
Okay, thanks. So when we talk about other shortlisted candidates, it's likely to be the people who formed part of that interview group, most likely.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a question from Nankumar Bhattacharya, who asks, can we have the draft communication that is going out to candidates not selected? My question, Nankumar, would be whether that you would have an expectation of signing off on such a communication on behalf of the Standards Division, which I'm not entirely sure would be a very good idea. We'd end up debating wording on a document that probably ought to be the purview of the Standards Division to come up with on the basis of our conversation here. But if you would like to clarify your question, if I've unfairly represented that, please do say something now. One thing that I could say is that I would be happy to take a look at that communication on behalf of the board to ensure that it fairly represents our feelings on this issue. But I'm only one member, so if anyone has a thought on that, please say so.
Good morning once again. I am Nand Kumar here. The question I raised is in the previous communications from the stakeholders who are not selected, they said that we just get a one-line communication, you are not selected. But there is no reason or no explanation why a candidate is not selected, is not communicated. So when I approached many of them to apply, they said, no, we don't get the feedback from GRI, why we are not selected, so we do not want to apply.
This is Bastian. I think on that particular point, for working groups and processes like the one we discussed today, we have never provided individual feedback to applicants, but we have always responded with more than one line, explained the process that we've gone through, and we plan to do the same thing here. And I can say that for all processes that have happened in the last 6 years, I think, because I've been overseeing all of those. So I think if it is an application to be part of one of the governance bodies, that might be a different issue, or any other process with GI. But I can confirm, and we are also planning to do that now, that we will get back. We will inform them about the fact that they have not been selected. We will explain the process on a high level. And we also want to extend that invitation, as just discussed, that they can continue to participate. I just want to set the record straight that we've not been handling these kind of application processes in a way that might discourage people from applying again. We are, however, always going to be faced with declining people. And I think just the success of the application runs are now a testament for also renewed interest in our work, and we expect more of these applications to come in the future. So we will, by definition, have to disappoint the majority of them with respect to membership in the groups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bastian.
Okay. Thank you, Bastian.
This is Dwight. I have to leave for another meeting, and so I want to extend my apologies. And I also want to say, despite my reservations, I was very impressed by the process and the results.
Thank you, Dwight.
And
That's
I have to
very
say
helpful.
goodbye to you. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Dwight.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Sure.
Okay, can we then move on from the Occupational Health and Safety Working Group onto our next topic, which is water? And I welcome Anna Kortova from the Standards Division to help us work through this one.
Judy, thank you very much, and a very warm welcome to members of the GSSB that are online. In this part of the presentation, I would like to discuss the proposed membership for the Water Project Working Group. I will give you an overview of the selection process, and I will give you a more detailed overview of the proposed membership to the Project Working Group, after which we will hand it over to you for approval. And for this part of the presentation, you will need items 03, which is the proposed Project Working Group composition for the water standard, and item 04, which is the anonymized full list of all applications received. Now, mindful of the time, I will only very quickly run through an overview of the selection process, which was fairly similar to the selection process of members to the Occupational Health and Safety Project Working Group. So we have in total received 53 applications at the close of the application period, and in fact we are still receiving inquiries from experts whether they can submit their applications, which we are not accepting at this point, largely because we received a remarkably high number of very qualified candidates, which we were very satisfied with. We have longlisted 24 candidates based on the selection criteria outlined in the terms of reference to the GRI 303 water. And in addition to the criteria in the terms of reference, we have also looked at criteria outlined in the proposed project working group composition. These are lines 48 to 59 in item 03. And mainly we have looked at applicants' experience and knowledge of water stewardship practices, water reporting practices, their practical use of GRI 303 water and GRI 306 effluents and waste. We have shortlisted and interviewed 17 candidates, and finally we have selected 15 to the project working group which we're presenting today. In advance of this proposal, we have reviewed the proposed membership with the GSSB sponsor Judy Kuszewski and GSSB Chair Judy Kuszewski and GSSB sponsor Nankumar Kapath, and have received their provisional approval. Moving on to the overview of the proposed project working group composition, in table 2, in item 3, this is line 94, you will find a table with all of the proposed candidates and their details, as well as the organizations and constituencies and regions that they represent. And in selecting these candidates, we ensured to bring critical subject matter expertise, an investor perspective, and also mediating institutions with the intent to align key water reporting instruments, which we have heard as one of the key challenges and wishes in the water stewardship space currently. We have selected 5 critical content experts who are internationally respected and recognized as leaders and leading parties in water stewardship and developing water reporting metrics. We have selected 4 investor representatives who bring strong investor and water risk perspective. We have also selected 2 mediating institutions, and these are parties whose water reporting metrics are widely used by the corporate sector and who are currently going through similar process of revising their water metrics, and collaborating with whom will give us a strong will bring a strong effort to harmonize metrics. And finally, we have chosen 4 business representatives who are either leaders in corporate water stewardship practices and water reporting, and or who have deep understanding of practical reporting challenges, and who will be able to test the feasibility of reporting against any proposed disclosures that subject matter experts may propose. We have fair gender representation in the group. We have 8 male and 7 female candidates. Looking at the balance of constituencies overall, they are quite well represented, with the exception that there are no labor representatives, because we haven't received any applicants from the labor constituency. However, the standards division believes, and this was confirmed by the GSSB labor representative, that having a labor perspective is not critical to the content and review of this particular standard. And if needed, we will be able to bring in that expertise either through consulting the GSSB sponsor or the GRI stakeholder group, or through organizing dedicated webinars, as Chelsea has mentioned in the beginning of this presentation. If we look at the regional representation, again, here it heavily bends towards candidates from Europe and North America, which is not surprising and reflective of the GRI market, although we have had interviews with more candidates from underrepresented regions that did not make it to the final group composition. However, the standards team will seek to provide dedicated consultation opportunities for these underrepresented geographies, and again, I'm referring to the remark Chelsea made in the beginning of this presentation that we will seek to solicit feedback of these candidates through an expert review panel or through another form of engagement. This feedback will not have any special status. It is just to inform the work of the group. And finally, before I hand this over, Judy, to you for leading us further through the conversation, I would like to say that in selecting these members, we have tried to ensure a rich and diverse representation of different perspectives in the group. We believe we have very strong subject matter experts that are balanced by the perspective of the investor community and businesses. And having spoken to all of these candidates during the interviews, we believe that the group dynamics will ensure a productive and consensus way to develop the standards, to revise the standards such that is reflective of the latest reporting trends, practices, and will still be accessible to report is and user-friendly. So with this, Judy, I would like to hand it over to you to guide us through the approval, but also through other unidentified issues that the GSSB would like to cover.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna. In a way, it is a pity that Dwight Justice had to leave us a little bit early, because it could be useful to hear a little bit more about the judgment that specific labor input into this project working group may not be necessary. Could you, Anna, or one of your colleagues, would you like to tell us a little bit more about that decision, that discussion process, and what's behind it, just because it's an unusual thing for GRI?
Sure, Judy, this is Chelsea here. So we spoke to Dwight about this this week. Lara had a conversation with him about this, and his perspective, and Bastian had spoken to him about it earlier, is that really right now there's only one trade union which deals specifically with water, and that's Public Services International, PSI, which is actually Jürgen's organization. But their focus really is on public utilities, so not private sector or corporations, and their key position is more around opposing privatization of water, so not really looking at environmental impacts related to water usage, which is really the focus of GRI's reporting standards. I think bearing in mind, we see a similar dynamic with this group with respect to labor, as we saw with OHS with respect to the investor constituency. So the time commitment we're asking for with these working groups is really significant. And from a labor perspective, if the issue isn't central to what they believe to be main areas of concern from a labor perspective, it will be very hard for us to ask for that kind of meaningful engagement over the course of a year-plus project. So I think if you refer to due process, although we are required to make a good effort to get multi-stakeholder representation, the failure to get representation from one specific constituency doesn't require us to not move ahead with the process, and I would ask the GSSB to help us think about alternate ways to make sure we can get that labor perspective, because I think it will be very hard, if not impossible, to get a dedicated labor representative.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I have a comment from Sulema. Please, Sulema.
Yes, thank you, Judy. I will come back to the fact that we do not have people from South America, and I think only one from Africa. So I really think that we should stress that it's very important to have representatives from the regional perspective. The other thing that I'm not seeing here, it's in some extent the community specialists or social specialists or human rights specialists is underrepresented. So that's why I would like to be an observer of this group, because there is an increased conflict in terms of use and impacts of the use of water for those that are dependent on this resource. So the two themes are main points of concern from my side. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Sulema. And Daniel Tayan has raised a similar question about whether any of the candidates engaged or are engaged on the right to water, the human right, understanding the human rights perspective on this in the working group, or any experience with the UN rapporteur on this issue. Anna, can you enlighten us a little bit as to that particular aspect, the extent to which that was explored in any of the interviews with candidates?
Judy, this is Chelsea here. We don't have specific proposed membership that brings in that perspective on right to water or the human rights angle. That wasn't, and if I'm thinking back to the project proposal that we discussed and asked for GSSB input on, that wasn't actually one of the key areas that was covered within that project proposal. So where there is overlap, I think, and where we'll be discussing in March later with you guys to quite a long degree the human rights review process, I think where there is overlap between these projects, we will be able to sort of bring that into the project as it goes forward. But no, we don't have in the proposed pool of candidates somebody with that specific perspective or having worked with the UN on that issue.
Okay. Okay. And if it is identified in the project working group's mandate and the description of what we're asking them to do, then that is a natural consequence of that situation. But if it is something, if it is the sort of thing that can be taken up in the human rights working group, we do plan to convene at a later stage during the year, then I think we should make a note of that as desired on the part of the GSSB.
Judy, this is Sulema again. Can I make an additional comment on this matter? Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, this is the thing about the management of this resource, water. There's a continuous lack of consideration of the users and right holders when defining methods or management structures in terms of the use of water, even from public policy around the world, as far as I know. So this is the thing about not having this look at the right holders' rights to access to water within this working group. We could, in theory, generate a set of standards that's not considering the potential conflict from the use perspective. For instance, here in Brazil, the law requires a lot of very technical stuff and consideration, and also the consideration of the right holder right to access of the water. In terms of competition, when allowing a company to extract water from rivers, the priority is for people, always. When the water is not, the amount of water is not enough for a private organization or for a community, the community has a priority. So I can provide an alternative solution, not right now, I'm not that creative, but I really think that we should oversee the work or include an observer with more experience in terms of conflict of use of water.
Okay, Chelsea, any?
Yeah, sure. So we've just gone back and looked at the background research. So we hadn't specifically been screening candidates for those that expertise because it hadn't been raised as part of the project scope. But we have actually found we do have candidates. So from the CEO Water Mandate, the representation has worked together with UN Global Compact, looking at water and human rights, exploring the roles and responsibilities of business, and they have published some research in the public domain on that. So I would propose, I bet if we go back and do a little bit more digging in the experts that we've put forward in this space, I bet they do have a good baseline level of knowledge. But certainly we do already have that perspective in at least one of the applicants for the group.
Okay. I think between Sulema and Daniel, there is some desire to ensure that there is a little bit of linkage and coordination between the water project working group and the human rights project working group when that eventually gets up and going. I would like to suggest that this is the role for the GSSB and specifically any particular GSSB members who are interested in being the project, the working group champions or sponsors. And I know that we have already identified some interest from among the GSSB for that particular role to help ensure that we as a board understand these linkages even where it goes beyond the scope of an individual project working group to understand and respond to those linkages. It is certainly up to us as the board to ensure that the final product is sufficiently coherent on issues of concern such as this.
Yeah, I really apologize for jumping in for the third time, but besides the composition and the background, I really think that the scope of the working group should take into consideration as a priority the impacts on right holders in terms of the use of water?
The GSSB signed off on the scope of work already a while back, although I can't tell you exactly when it happened. And so if we were to change the scope of work, we'd presumably be obliged at that point to rerun the search for members, and it would have a very serious impact on the timelines. Chelsea, would you like to reflect on the extent to which this is even possible at this point?
Sorry, this is Bastian. Just as a follow-on to that particular point, I think while it is not explicit in the project scope, that rights perspective, I think it's fair to summarize the work of many of the institutions that are now represented by experts in this proposed group. Their work has always been focused on the community perspective and bringing that nexus of corporate perspective and the community perspective together. I think it is certainly for the work of the CEO Water Mandate, but also WI, WWF, IUCN. They have done work in that space, and I think if you had to summarize what they have been doing, while it is probably not necessarily always sold under the umbrella term of the rights perspective, that is where all their activism in that space comes from. So I'm reasonably sure that we have that perspective covered already. I think there is certainly potential in scoping also the initial discussions of the group to remind them of that aspect, but I think it will emerge naturally with this set of experts in the discussion zone also. So I feel that this community perspective will be covered through the approach and the context specificity of the water issue. We have all the right experts lined up for this.
Thank you, Bastian. I do agree with you. I'm more comfortable right now.
Daniel has asked a question as to, given what you've just said, Bastian, and given what we do understand about the actual perspectives and concerns of many of the individuals that are proposed for this working group, is it possible to edit the terms of reference for the project working group to have a more explicit reference to the users or rights perspective? Given that it would then simply formalize what we understand to be some of those concerns and perspectives that will already be shared by those members. Could you enlighten us as to the appropriateness of that from a process angle?
This is Bastian again. I think in principle that is possible. We would have to table that at the upcoming meeting, and we would agree on specific wording there. Again, we'll have to look at the fine print of this. It should be meaningful also for those that then engage with us with this process. But that is possible. I would propose, though, that we make that part of the formal agenda then. We have already an item on the agenda for the in-person meeting that deals with these two groups, and we will have time to propose an adjustment to the wording and move that through the formal approval as well.
Okay. All right, and in your opinion, does that have any impact on the decision that we're asked to make right now with respect to the composition of the working group?
No, given my earlier comment regarding the representation also of the community perspective through the work of the institutions that are selected here and also the work of the individuals selected here, I think that has no implication for the approval at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Okay, then I would suggest that we make a little time for this in our in-person meeting later this month. All right, so I think then we are moving towards a consensus on this slate of candidates. Can I ask the board whether there are any further questions or comments? And if anyone has any objections, please raise them now. So that we can identify whether we do have consensus on this or not. Okay, in the absence of any objections, I will assume that we do indeed have consensus on this slate of candidates in light of all of the discussion that we have just had right now, which we will follow up on in the in-person meeting. We have another question that's been put to us, which has to do with the same question of the expert review panel, and we will take that up all, I believe we have resolved that question to the extent that we can today for the purposes of communicating with the unsuccessful candidates. And in terms of the actual sort of practicalities around convening such a group and their mandate and how they would operate, we will take that up later on in the month when we get together in person. We also got this question as to other unidentified issues that the GSSB would like to cover. We obviously have a previously unidentified issue around the rights concepts from the users and rights holders perspective, which is exactly what we will be taking up with respect to any tweaks or adjustments to the terms of reference to this working group. Okay, I think then it sounds to me that we have got to the end of that particular item on the agenda, and this then just opens us up to any other business. At this moment, do we have any particular specific topics on our AOB agenda, or does anyone from the board have any issue that they would like to raise in this context?
Nothing from our end, Judy. This is Chelsea.
No? Okay. Are there any questions or comments or announcements with respect to the upcoming in-person meeting that we can answer right now? I think that might be the only thing that's really on anyone's mind right now, apart from these working groups themselves, which will be getting underway very shortly. Well,
Nothing from our side.
Okay, thank you, Sion. If no one has any other additional issues or questions that they would like to raise at this point, then I think we have done very well to get to the end of our agenda a little bit early. And I'd like to extend my thanks to all of you for your participation and your engagement with these topics. It's really, as you know, very important, really essential function for the GSSB to have full confidence in these working groups to help move us forward with the very critical work of the review and update of these standards, a really core task for the GSSB. So thank you very much for all of your efforts in this direction. In some respects, as it's clear from the water and the occupational health and safety working groups, it is in some respects a happy task to have more highly qualified members than you have vacancies for in these working groups. And that's a real testament to the quality of people who are out there in these fields and to the success that GRI had in engaging people and offering something that seemed to be very relevant and attractive to be part of. And I think we're all agreed that we very much do want to find a place for all of those people who we can't make a formal place for on the working groups, to ensure that they're engaged and that we benefit from their wisdom in these working groups. Many thanks coming into the Secretariat and the Standards Division for all of their effort and the quality of the work that they do behind the scenes and every day to help support our work and our decisions. If there are no further comments or questions, then I would like to draw the meeting to a close at this point and look forward to seeing all of you in Amsterdam, or as many of you as possible in Amsterdam in a couple of weeks' time. And please do keep an eye out for any communications with respect to the final labor candidate for the Occupational Health and Safety Working Group, which we hope will be resolved in the next couple of days. Other than that, we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. We'll be in touch with all of the preparatory materials for that course. And thank you to all for your participation from wherever you are in the world today.
Thank you, Judy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you. See you in Amsterdam.